All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga and to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. This is a summary of chapter 1 through to chapter 11. Chapter 1 starts with an invocation verse. Janmadi asya yato anvayat itaratas char tesva abhigya swarat tene brahma hridaya adi kavaye muhayanti yat surayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo amrasa damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam parama dhimahi. This concludes that we should meditate upon the absolute truth, which is bhakti. This chapter also highlights the ultimate good for people in Kali Yuga, which is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, because it gives the highest truth, uprooting material miseries, because being the mature fruit, the essence of all Vedic literature. There are 6 questions that are asked by the sages who are gathered. In chapter 2, Suta Goswami answers the questions beginning with verse 6. Savai pumsham paro dharmo yato bhaktir atokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasiddhati. The supreme dharma is devotional service. 3 features of the absolute truth, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagwan, are explained as the non-dual substance in verse 11. He is one, not 2 or 3, even though he has 3 features. Chapter 3 lists all the avatars of Krishna. Verse 28 is the Paribhasha Sutra. Ete chamsa kala pumsa. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. Verse 40 says that this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the literary incarnation of God. Chapter 4 is appearance of Narad to Vyasa as he is lamenting. There is a bit about Shukadev Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit, and about Vyasadev's birth and achievements, dividing Vedas into 4 to purify people. Chapter 5, Narad instructs Vyasadev and inspires his heart as he emphasizes on glorification of Krishna's Braj Leela and upon devotional service. Narad narrates his own pastime with the 4 Kumaras and his transformation due to Prem, which are related in chapter 6, and how after Krishna appeared upon the lotus of his heart and disappeared suddenly, it was an act to increase Narad's hankering, and he began performing perfect kirtan after that. In chapter 7 appears the famous verse, Atmaramascha munayo nirgrantha api urukrame kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim itham bhuta guno hari. It is a verse that Mahaprabhu explained many times. The Lord possesses transcendental qualities and therefore can attract everyone, even liberated souls. Ashwatthama is punished by Arjun in this chapter after being examined by Krishna in Dharma. In chapter 8, 3 topics are covered: Kunti's prayers, Parikshit being saved, and Yudhishthir's grief after war. Among immense glorification, Kunti in verse 25 says, Vipadaha shantutaha shashvat tatra tatra jagadguru bhavato darshanam yat shyat apunar bhava darshanam. I wish that all calamities would happen again and again so that we could see you again and again. In verse 37, she talks about their dependency on the Lord's mercy. In chapter 9, Bhishma Dev passes away after offering prayers and meditating on the form of Krishna as Arjun's charioteer. He imparts wisdom to change the heart of Yudhishthir, who ascends the throne. Chapter 10 is separation mood in Aishwarya Bhav, specially expressed by the woman as Krishna departs for Hastinapur. He departs Hastinapur. Yudhishthir rules over earth and seas, and there is auspiciousness everywhere. Chapter 11 is the joyful meeting of Dwarkavasis with their beloved Krishna, who relish the shelter of his lotus feet. Verse 9 talks about the movements of Krishna, giving a grand version of the events and hints at Krishna's return to Braj. Verse 37 and 40 establish Krishna being unaffected by the gunas of Prakriti, although he enjoys sense objects with his senses. This is a summary of chapter 12 now. The personality who was as glorious as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in qualities was born with a true purpose, to teach and nourish humanity. The Lord protects his dear devotees, and everything he does has deeper reasons, although they may seem shocking, traumatizing, ecstatic, or even horrific. This chapter describes how Yudhishthir, freed from personal desires, protected the citizens everything for the sake of his object of love, Krishna, who reciprocated with the most beautiful grandson. Krishna performed a child's play-like pastime for himself in the womb of Uttara, caused by the heat of the Brahmastra. Krishna gave Parikshit a seed of courage, because of which the baby was not afraid of the fire of the weapon. This is like a blanket of protection that we, the listeners of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, feel also by being immersed in this glorious pastime. Parikshit was then given another special gift, the direct vision of the form of the Lord. That form wore a gold crown. He was dark in complexion and wearing cloth shining like lightning and was the size of a thumb. Though the Lord extends in all directions, he arranged to become thumb-sized, as though telling us that he is achievable. His love is achievable. He is controlled by the love of his dear devotees. I will do this for you also. It gives us the impetus to be qualified, and the qualities of Parikshit Maharaj, as described by the Brahmins, lay out before us as a map that we can follow towards our destination. In verse 14 of Prem Bhakti Chandrika, it says, Mahajanera Jai Pathatate Haba Anurata Purvapara Kariya Vichar Sadhan Smarana Leela Ihate Na Kare Hela Kai Mane Kariba Sushar. I am attached to the path followed by the great devotees of the past. I will deliberate the meanings of scriptures according to the context. I will not neglect the sadhan, remembrance of pastimes. I will reach perfection using body and mind. The astonishing nature of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and in this chapter, the qualities and achievements of Parikshit Maharaj is such that it inspires us. Parikshit is attached to follow the path of the great devotees of the past. Hence, the Brahmins list the great personalities of the past, whom Parikshit would be like. Ikshvaku, Ram, Sibi, Bharat, Arjuna, Kartavirya, Shiva, Rantideva, Yayati, Bali, Prahlad, and like the shelter of all living beings, Narayan himself. He deliberated the meaning of scriptures, this is Parikshit Maharaj, which were delivered to him by Sri Shukadev Goswami. He remembered always, inquired about the Lord, and he reached perfection using his body and mind. When hearing that he would be killed by Takshaka, who would be dispatched by Brahman's son, Parikshit was detached, and he constantly remembered the Lord, whom he had seen in the womb. The Lord, after his appearance in the womb, loitering around with the club, encircling him constantly like a shooting star, his eyes blood red, vanquished the radiation like the sun, and like the sun evaporates the dew. The Lord attracted Parikshit's mind, and then he disappeared like a thief who had entered into the womb to steal Parikshit's mind. That mind performed amazing tasks, but was always absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord, and was given eligibility to hear topics of ras. 7 days of Smarna at the bank of Ganges, where self-realized Sukadev Goswami performed perfect kirtan. Parikshit's queries were answered at the last days of his human pastimes. He will be celebrated forever as famous Parikshit, the hero. Verse 30 says, Sa esha loke vikyataha Parikshit iti yat prabhuhu purvam drishtam anudhyayam Parikshit sheta nareshva iha. Because he constantly remembered the Lord, whom he had seen in the womb, and searched for him among all men, he was famous as Parikshit in this world, the one who was protected by the Lord at the time of birth and death. After Parikshit was saved in the womb, he grew up with care and affection, and Yudhishthir, desiring to rid himself of sin, performed a horse sacrifice. And he began to consider ways to attain wealth, and by his brother's mercy, and by Krishna's mercy, inspiration, who brought wealth, the brothers brought wealth left from the sacrifice of King Maruta. Krishna had the king perform the sacrifice with the Brahmins. After staying there for some months to satisfy his friends, he took permission of the king, Draupadi, and others, and departed for Dwarka. Vanchakalpadrubhyascha kripa sindhuvaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.